So let's get started with the dynamic block tool of AutoCAD. So dynamic blocks are more advanced type of blocks in which you can change their shape, size and their geometries using a set of rules or parameters even after inserting those block references in your drawing. Now as an example, I'll show you some dynamic blocks first, which we will make in this module. So here in this first example, we have this road sign block, and as of now you'll find it as a simple standalone object. But when you click on this object, you'll see the base point or the base grip, which is always present for a block reference, and also we have an additional grip. Now using this grip, we can change the appearance. Now here, if I change it to U-turn, the block will change in this way. If I click on this grip and change it to stop, it will change in this way. Now, this is still a single block, but we can change its properties even after inserting this block reference in our drawing. Now, here is another example. In this case, we have this sink, and here we have the base point and an additional grip. So when we click on this grip, we'll be able to stretch it or contract it to some particular distances. So that's a dynamic block. There is another form of this block here in example 3. In this case, we have a list, and from this list, we can change the block size. So I'll click on this and the block size changed. Similarly, we have these different sizes which are available for this block. So throughout this module, we'll learn to make these blocks and also lots of other blocks with dynamic properties using the rules, parameters, and actions. So the dynamic blocks can be made in the block editor environment, and the block editor is accessible only after creating a block. So here we have this simple object. We'll first convert it into a block and then we'll open it in a block editor to access the tools which are required for creating a dynamic block. So in order to convert it into a simple block, I'll click on this create block, and you're already aware of these steps. So I'll just name it. So I'll type sofa, and now I'll click on pick point, and in this case I'll select this lower left point as the pick point. Now I'll click on select objects, and I'll select all of these objects and press enter. Now we have this allow exploding option checked, and in this case make sure this open in block editor is checked. So this will directly open the block in block editor environment where we can modify this block. So now I'll click on OK. And we have the block here, but it's open in block editor, so it's still behaving as if it's a normal object. Now in this block editor environment, we have this block authoring palettes, and on this palette we have these different tabs. Now these tabs will be used for creating our dynamic block, and here we have the parameters which will be used in our dynamic block. We have the actions which are always accompanied with parameters, but not in all of the cases. There are some actions which don't require any parameter. And we have this parameter set, which is a combination of actions and parameters. And also we have the constraints which we have already seen, and we can use these constraints to make our own dynamic block. Now these constraints are also available here on the panel. So we have the geometric constraints, the dimensional constraints, and if for any reason you are not able to find this block authoring palettes, for example, let's say that we don't have it here, I'll close it. Now in that case, you can bring it again by clicking on this authoring palettes tool from the manage panel. Here we have it. So once you are done with this block editor window, click on close block editor, and here we have our block. So this was an introduction to the dynamic block and some examples of the dynamic blocks. In this video, we will convert this block into a dynamic block and with some dynamic properties. For that, we need to go to the block editor environment. So I'll select the block, right click and select block editor. Now here the objects will behave like normal entities, normal line, arc and circle, and we can modify it. So we'll convert this block into a dynamic block so that the length of this sofa can be increased in both the directions. And also we don't want base point to be here, we want it to be here at the center. So I'll go to this parameters tab and now select the first parameter, which is base point, and now click at this point. So now the base point has been changed. Now let's go to this linear parameter and now click at the first point and then click on the second point here and click at any point to place this placeholder. And now here we have this distance 1 parameter. Now you'll notice this exclamation sign, which indicates that we still have an action to apply to this parameter. And to apply the action, we need to go to this actions tab. Now obviously we want this length to be increased in either direction. So for that we can select this stretch action. So let's select this stretch action. And now look at the command line, which prompts you to select the parameter, which is this distance 1 parameter. Let's select it. Now specify a point to associate it. So we can select either this point or this one. So I'll select this one for now. And now specify the first point of the frame. So we'll make a crossing window just like this. We'll make this frame and we'll make it long enough to enclose the areas as I'm showing here. So now click at this point. And now we need to select the objects. So once again, make another frame and make sure that all of these objects, including the parameter, is included in our selection set. And now press enter. So here we have it. The stretch action is now added, but we still have the exclamation sign, which indicates that one more action is required. So I'll go to this stretch action once again, and I'll select the distance 1 parameter. Now select this point and once again make a frame here, and this should also include the same objects as we did in the previous case. And once again make a crossing window to include all of these objects like this. And in this case also I've included this distance 1 parameter. Now press enter and here we have it. Now the block is prepared and we can test this block directly using this test block option. So let's click on this test block option in the block editor. And now here we have this test window. So let's click on it and we have these two grips. Now click on this grip and yes, we are able to stretch it. Now select this grip and yes, we are able to stretch it in this direction as well. So now let's click on this close test block and we can save the block and close this block editor as well. And here we have it. Now we can remove this instance of the block and we can insert a new reference. And when you select this reference, you'll notice that the base point has changed, and also we have these grips which can be used to modify the length of this sofa as per our requirement. And here we have it. Our first block is now prepared. So I'll start with this simple drawing, and in this case we have it as normal drawing objects. It's not a block. We will convert it into a simple dynamic block. So for that I'll go to this create block icon and now give it a name. So let's name it as sink and now select the pick point. And in this case I'll select this one as the pick point, the midpoint of this line. And now select the objects and select this complete object and press enter. Now make sure this allow exploding is checked and also this open in block editor is checked and click on OK. Now a block will open in block editor and now we can add different parameters and actions. So I'll start with the parameters and I'll once again add the linear parameter which we have added in the previous lesson also. So I'll click on this midpoint and I'll click on this midpoint and I'll specify a location for this parameter. Now we need to add actions to this parameter. For that I'll go to this actions tab, select the stretch action, now select the parameter and now select the point to which you want to associate it, and this will be the point. Now specify the first corner of the frame and include all of these objects. Now make sure that this central part of this sink is also included, and let's click here and now once again make a crossing window to select the same objects just like this and press enter. Now go to stretch action again and select the same parameter, and this time specify this as the parameter point, and now click on this point somewhere at this point and make another window, and now again click at this point and make another crossing window just like this and press enter. Now we have our block defined. Now let's test it. So I'll click on this test block, and now when you click on this block you'll notice that we have these two grips, and using these grips we can increase its length on either of its side. But in this case, if you'll notice, the block can be stretched asymmetrically and the center of this sink is now moving according to the grip. So in order to resolve this problem, we can redefine this block. So I'll close this test block window and now I'll select this distance 1 parameter. Now right click, select properties, and now go to this miscellaneous panel, and from this base location select midpoint, and now close this property panel and once again go to this test block. Now let's select this block again and now let's stretch it, and now you'll notice that we are able to stretch the block in both the directions using a single grip obviously, and also the center of this block or the sink is fixed in this case. Now let's close this test block window, and now we can add an increment value also to this block. So in this case we are able to uniformly add this block, add length to this block. But if you want to allow some increment value, for example, if you want this block to increase in length by a value of 10 units, then you can also do that. And for that, once again, I'll go to this distance 1 parameter and I'll go to properties. Now scroll down this list, and from this distance type select list. And now you can see that here we have some random value in the distance value. So click here and click on this small icon, and now we have the default value applied here. So let's change it to 800 and let's add it. Let's add 850 and let's add 900 also, and click on OK. Now let's close it and let's test the block. Now let's select it again, and now when you click on this grip, you'll notice that we can only stretch it to an increment value of these distances which we have already applied, which is at a 50 unit interval. So we can only stretch it at an interval of 50 units. Now in this case also you can see that stretching on either side of the block will stretch it on the other side. So we can remove one of the grips from this block. So for that, I'll again close this test block and I'll select this distance parameter, and now go to properties, scroll it down, and from this number of grips I'll change it to 1. And also in this distance type I'll change this list to increment, and now I'll change the increment value. So in this case I'll change the increment value to 200, and now the size of block will increase at an interval of 200 units, and that you can see with these markers. Now if you want to specify a maximum length that can be allowed, you can also add that value here. So I'll add a maximum value of 1200 units, and now press tab key and let's close it. And now once again go to this test block and now select the block, and now you'll notice that we only have a single grip, and when you click on this grip we have these many increment points which is stretching the block by a 200 unit distance, and that's the maximum distance of 1200 which is allowed according to the property of this parameter. So now let's close this test block window, and also let's save the block and close block editor. And here we have the final dynamic block with the applied properties. In this video, I will tell you about point and rotation parameters. So here we have this block, and it's basically a simple floor plan of a single room. And I'll select this block, then right click and go to this block editor option. Now in this block editor, go to this parameters tab and select this point option. So using this point option, we can move any block or any content of this block independently from its parent block. So let's say that in this complete block, we want this computer panel to move independently. For that, I'll just select the point parameter and I'll click at any point here, and now click to place this placeholder. And now we need to associate it with an action. So I'll go to actions and I'll select this move action, Now we need to select the parameter, which is this position 1 parameter. Now we need to select the object. So obviously the object is this complete computer set along with this parameter, and now press enter. And here we have it. Now we can move this computer set independently of this parent block, and we can test it also. So let's go to this test block and now select the block, and you'll see that we have an additional grip here, and using this grip we can now move it anywhere in this block. Now we have one more thing to add here. We can also add a rotation parameter so as to align it to any angle or to any direction, and for that I'll close this test block window, and once again I'll go to this parameter and now select this rotation parameter. So now click at anywhere in the drawing area to specify the base point of rotation. So the point which you will click now will become the base point, or the point which remains fixed while rotating the object. So in this case I'm selecting this midpoint as the base point, and now specify the radius of parameter. So in this case let's take this point as the radius, and now directly press enter. Now again we need to go to actions and select the rotate action. Now select this angle 1 parameter and now select objects, and in this case the object will be this angle 1 parameter, this complete set of object, and also this position 1 parameter, and now press enter, and we have it here. Now we can test the block. So let's go to this test block and select this block completely, and now you'll notice that we have an additional grip for rotation along with this move grip. So let's click on this move grip or the position grip, and let's move it here, and we can easily move it. And now we can rotate it as well, but in this case it will rotate with respect to the original base point. So I'll click at this point, and now you can see that it's rotating but with respect to the original base point, just like this. So we can move it back to the original position, and now we can rotate it from this grip, and after rotating we can move it to the desired position wherever we want it, just like this. So now let's press escape key, and let's now close this test block window. So now we saw that when we move the object, the rotation parameter did not move with it, and if you want to move the rotation parameter along with the object, then you can add it as well in the position 1 parameter set or the position 1 action set. So for that you need to select this action, the move action, and then right click and select this action selection set, and now select the modify selection set option, and now once again select the objects, and in this case we want to add one more parameter, which is this angle parameter. So let's select it and press enter, and we have it modified. Now let's go to test block again and now test it. So select it, and now we'll move it first, and now you'll notice that this rotation grip also moves along with this object. So now we can rotate it, and after rotating the move grip is also following the main object, and we can now move it and place it wherever required, just like this. So now let's go to this close test block and let's close it. So in this way we can add position as well as rotation parameter to our dynamic block. So we'll create the dynamic block, but with the help of geometrical and dimensional constraints. So I've made this drawing here, and it's a simple rectangle and a circle. The rectangle has been filleted at all of these 4 edges, and now we'll convert it into a dynamic block. For that I'll go to this create block tool and now give it a name. So let's name it as test block, and now select the pick point, which is the center point in this case. Now select objects and select all of them, press enter. Now make sure allow exploding is checked, and also open in block editor is checked, and click on OK. So now here we have it. The object is now open in the block editor, and now we will add required constraints to convert it into a dynamic block. So in this case we want this block to be converted into a dynamic block in such a way so that the length of this complete rectangle can be increased without changing any other parameter, including the fillets at the corner. Now for that we can go to this constraints tab, and here you'll see some of these geometric constraints and also these dimensional constraints. Now these geometric constraints can be seen here also, and the dimensional constraints can be found here. So you can use either the panel or the tab for accessing the tools. So I'll now start by adding the align constraint from this dimensional panel. So I'll select this aligned, and now move your cursor close to this midpoint, and you'll see this marker, the red marker. When it is close to the midpoint of this rectangle, click, and now move it close to this point and click again, and click at a point to place it. And now you'll notice that we have the very familiar grip here. Now let's go and test the block. So I'll go to this test block. Now select the rectangle, click on this grip, and we have a problem here. Now the geometry is getting completely distorted and we are not getting the results which is required. That simply means we need to add additional constraints or additional restrictions. So I'll close this test block window. And now in order to constrain the shape of this geometry, we need to add some geometric constraints, and that can be done directly using this auto constraint. So select this auto constraint, select the complete geometry and press enter. And we have constraints applied to all of the required sides. Now let's go and test the block again. And here we have it. Now the block works as per our requirement. So now let's go and close this test block window. So you have a block that does not require lots of parameters or actions. You can use this geometric constraint or the dimensional constraint as well for creating simple dynamic blocks. In the previous lesson, we made this simple dynamic block, and we can modify this block, the length of this block, essentially by changing it with this grip. Now when we change the length of this block, the center becomes off-centric, and now it's not centered with respect to the complete geometry. Now in order to keep this centered, we need to modify this block additionally. So I'll select this block, then right click and select block editor. Now here in block editor, we need to add one more constraint, and that will be the aligned constraint once again. So I'll select this aligned constraint and now select the circle. So now when you select the circle, you'll notice this grip at the center of this circle or the marker at the center. And now go to this vertical line and make sure that this time marker appears at the center, which is not the case. So I'll move it and now I'll select it here. Now we can see the marker at the center. So let's click and now place this constraint. So now you can see that the length in between these 2 points is 5 units. Obviously we don't want this length for other geometries also. So when we stretch this rectangle, the length will also change. But in this case, if you keep it that way, the length will not change, although the total length will change. So to make this clear, I'll just modify this value and I'll change it to d1 by 2. So let's type here d1 by 2. Now in this way, we can restrict the length of this d2 value, or the distance between these 2 points, always equal to half of d1, which is this total length or the length of rectangle. Now click outside to accept the values, and now let's go and test the block. So I'll go to this test block. Now select this rectangle and now let's move it. Now you can see that the circle is always centered no matter how you change the length. Now we can apply one more constraint, and here you can see that the circle is moving along with the length of this rectangle. Now what if we want the circle to remain fixed at its position and we want to stretch this block in either direction? So for that we need to modify it additionally. So let's now move back to block editor, and now I'll go to this constraints tab, select this fix constraint, and now apply it on the center of this circle. So click on the circle and the constraint is now applied. Now let's go to this test block again. Now select it and now move it. And now you'll notice that the circle will always remain fixed and the length can be changed in either direction in this way. So in this way, you can also make your blocks with the help of constraints. So I'll once again close this test block, and now I'll also close this block editor by saving the changes. And here we have it, the final block as per our requirement. So here we have these 3 drawings, and these are basically road signs, and we have them as simple drawing objects. They are not blocks. We'll first convert them into block and then we'll use the visibility parameter. So for converting them into block, click on this create block icon and now give it a name. So I'll name the first block as U-turn. Now select pick point and click anywhere in the drawing area to select the pick point. Now select objects and select the complete set of object here, just like this, and press enter. Now make sure allow exploding is checked and also make sure that open in block editor is unchecked and click on OK. So now our first block is ready. Let's click on create block again and let's now name it as stop. And click on this pick point and select this pick point. Now select object and select all the objects of this stop sign and press enter. And now once again here also allow exploding should be checked and open in block editor should be unchecked and click on OK. Now once again click on create block and give it a name and I'll name it as speed limit. Now select this pick point and select the center here as the pick point. Now click on select objects and select all of these objects and press enter. And here also I'll select this allow exploding checkbox and uncheck this open in block editor and click on OK. So now all the three blocks are ready and we'll now convert them into a single dynamic block. So in order to do that, once again go to this create block and now give it a name. So I'll name it as road sign. Select this pick point and click on the center of this block. Now click on select objects and select all of these objects, press enter. Now make sure allow exploding is checked and also make sure open in block editor is checked this time and now click on OK. So now here we have these three blocks. Now let's overlap these blocks over one another and with their base points. So here we have it. Now select it and from this base point move it to this point here. Okay, so now we have these overlapping blocks and we will now apply visibility parameter so that only one block is visible at a time. So for that, go to this parameters tab, select this visibility parameter and click at a point to place it just about there. Now obviously we need to add an action. So go to action tab and here you will not find any action associated with the visibility parameter. Actually the action related to visibility parameter is available here and we can add it from this panel. So click on this visibility states and the default visibility state will become visible, which is visibility state 0. So let's now rename it. So click on rename and rename it to U-turn. Now click on new again and this time name it as stop and click on new again and name it as speed limit and click on OK. So now we have these three visibility states. Let's click on OK. Okay, so we have added the three visibility states and these states are present here. So you can change the visibility states from the drop down, but as of now, it's not changing anything here in the block. So in order to make the change, we need to hide some of the blocks which are not required for a particular visibility states. So let's go to this U-turn state first. And now here we have this hide and unhide or show and hide options. So I'll first select this make invisible or hide option. So click on this make invisible and now click on the blocks which should remain invisible in this U-turn. So that should be all the blocks except the U-turn block. So let's click on this speed limit block and here in this case you can see that we have some overlapping objects. So the selection may be a little bit difficult. So in order to ease this process, you can turn on this selection cycling option. And if you are not seeing this selection cycling option on the status bar, go to this customization and select this selection cycling. So this should be checked and then you'll find this option here. So turn it on. Now when you go to this option, whenever an overlapping object appears, a list containing all of this object will become visible just like this. And now you can easily select all the overlapping objects. In this case, we need to select the first one and press enter. Now go to make invisible again and select this stop sign and press enter. So now all the blocks which are not required for this visibility state are hidden. So let's now change the visibility state to stop. And in this case, we need to hide all the blocks except the stop sign. So once again, go to this make invisible and click on this U-turn and hide it. Now go to this make invisible and click on this 8 letter so that this speed limit can be selected easily, and hide it. Okay, now let's go to the last visibility state, which is a speed limit, and in this case we need to hide every block except the speed limit. So select this make invisible option and click on this U-turn, press enter, select it again, and this time select the stop sign and press enter. So now here we have it. Now let's test it. Let's go to this U-turn, let's go to stop and speed limit, and yes, it's working. So let's now save the block and close block editor, and here we have the block. So we can now test this block as well. So let's click on this grip, we have this U-turn, let's go to stop, and yes, we have the stop sign, and when you click here again, go to speed limit, we have the speed limit sign. So now in this way we have easily added the visibility parameter to our dynamic block. So in this video we will have a look at the block tables, and we'll use this dynamic block which we have made in the previous lessons for explaining the lesson. Now let's select the block, then right click and go to block editor. Now here you'll notice that we have this simple sync drawing and we have this distance 1 parameter here. Now let's add some increment value to this parameter so that the block can be stretched to certain specific values only, and for that we can select the distance 1 parameter, then right click and go to properties. Now here in the properties panel, scroll it down and you'll see here in the value set the distance type, which is set to none. So let's click it and select list, and now we have the current distance specified here, which is 762 unit between these two endpoints. So now let's add more values to this list, and for that I'll click on this small icon and now add more values here. So we have the 762 already added, so let's now add 850. Click on add, let's add 1060, let's add it, and let's add 1600 as the fourth value. So as you can see that I am adding these values very randomly, they are not added at any specified interval. So once you have added these values, click on OK, and now as soon as you select OK, you'll notice that there will be these markers at the specific intervals. And now let's close this properties panel and let's test the block. So now click on this block, and when you click on this grip, you'll notice that we can now stretch this block only to these specified values, and we cannot stretch it to any other values. But in this case we don't have any visual clue as to what the length of these specific values is. So in order to add any visual clue or a list that represents the length of these increments, we can use block table. So let me just explain it with the correct example here. So I'll close this test block window and now select this block table. So you can select the block table from this dimensional panel, or you can also select it from this actions tab and block properties table. So I'll select this block table from here and now click at a point to specify the action, and now here it will prompt you to specify number of grips, which should be 1. So directly press enter. Now once you press enter, you'll see this block properties table, and here select this add properties, and it will indicate the parameters which are already added, which is distance 1, the linear type parameter, which is here. So select it, click on OK. Now we have this distance 1 parameter, and we need to add the values which we want to see in this parameter or in this list. So click here and you'll see this drop down. Let's select the value, which is 762, the original one. Then click on the second row, select the second value, select the third row, third value, and the final row and the final value. So now we have added all the 4 values. Let's click on OK. And here we have it. The block table is now added. So let's now test the block. So click on this test block. Now select it. And now we have this down pointing grip. Let's select it, and now we have the visual clue as well. So now we can simply see the distances, or the distance between these two endpoints, which is 762 in the first case, 850 in the second, 1060 and 1600. So this is another method of adding increment values or a list of values to the existing dynamic block. Now in this case also you can use this grip to change the values. Obviously this grip will always be there, but if you want to hide this grip for whatever reasons, you can do that as well. So let's now close this test block. And now let's say that we want to hide this grip because it's obviously of no use when we have this block table. So let's select this distance 1 parameter, then right click, go to properties. Now scroll it down and here you'll see number of grips, which is 1 in this case. So let's change this value to 0. And now we don't have any grip. Don't delete this distance 1 parameter, because if you delete the distance 1 parameter, the block table will lose its importance because it's pulling all of its data from this distance 1 parameter. So you can only change the number of grips, but you cannot delete the parameter in this case. So now let's click on this close icon and now let's test the block once again. Now select the block, and this time we only have this grip and we can change the values directly from this grip. So let's now close this test block and let's close the block editor and save the changes in our block. So now we have seen lots of parameters and actions in the dynamic block, and they were fairly simple. Now let's look at a little bit complicated action. So here we have this block, a simple block, and we have made this with the name table set here. Now we have inserted a copy of this block here, and you can see that it's a mirror image of this original block. Now we want to make a dynamic block in such a way so that a copy or an array of this complete set can be made in horizontal as well as in vertical direction at certain intervals. So for that, go to this create block and now give it a name. So I'll name it as array set and select a pick point, which will be this point in this case. Now select object and select both of these objects, press enter. Now make sure allow exploding is checked and also make sure open in block editor is checked. Now click on OK. So here we have these two blocks, the first and the second one. Now go to this parameters and select this XY parameter. Now specify the first point for the X parameter. And now you'll notice that we can directly specify the X and Y coordinates of the endpoint, which we can dynamically click at this drawing area and specify, or we can also enter this coordinate with the help of coordinate values. So I'll do that. So I'll type at 2000 for the X coordinate value and minus 2300 for the Y value. We are entering a negative value for Y direction because it's pointing downwards. And also we have added an add sign to add an incremental or a relative value. So let's now press enter, and here we have it. Now this is the point which we have specified with 2000 as X and 2300 as Y. So now let's go to this actions and now select this array action. Now we need to select the parameter, which is this parameter. So click here. And now we need to select the objects, which is these two objects. And we also need to ensure that this parameter is selected here. And now press enter. So now we need to specify the distance between rows, which is 2300 in this case, and the distance between column, which is 2000 in this case. And now press enter. And we have this block here. So now let's test it, and in order to test this, click on this test block and now click on this block, and now we have these additional grips here. So using these grips you can add the array or the copies of this original object. So let's click on this grip and move it on the right side, and you'll notice that at an interval of 2000 unit a new block is added, and you can click at any point to place it. Also, when you click on this grip or when you click on this grip, you can add multiple rows at a distance of 2300 as we have already specified here. In order to add rows and columns directly, you can use the third grip, which is this one. So using this grip, you can not only add the rows, but you can also add the columns like this. So in this way, you can add array action to the dynamic block. So let's now close this test block window and let's save the block and close the block editor. And here we have the final block, which can be now used here just like this. So here is our question related to the module. Now we need to make a dynamic block with this sync drawing, and this dynamic block should be made in such a way that its length can be increased to an increment value of 3 inches in either direction, and the center of this dynamic block should be fixed. Also ensure that the maximum length of this block goes to 25 inches and the minimum remains at 9 inches. To start making this block, I'll go to this create block and I'll select a name. So let's name it as sync, and now click on pick point. Now I'll select this point, the middle point, as the pick point, and as you can see that I'm not able to select it because object snap is off. So I'll go to object snap and I'll select midpoint. Also I have this dynamic input selected which I don't want, so I'll go to this customization, select dynamic input and turn it off. Now I'll go to this point. Now I'll click on select objects and select all of it and press enter. Now make sure allow exploding is checked and also open in block editor is checked because we want to make more modifications in this. Now click on OK. So here it is, a block in this block editor environment. Now I'll start by adding linear parameter. So here on the parameters tab we have this linear. So select this linear, click on the first point here, the midpoint, and the second point here, and place it somewhere over here. Here also we can turn off this dynamic mode, and now go to actions. Now we'll apply this stretch action. So for this, select the distance 1 parameter and now click on the point here. Now make the stretch frame. So I'll make this stretch frame to include the circle and most of these objects. Now make a selection of objects. So once again I'll click on this point and select it in such a way that the circle and the parameter are